Before we begin, if you care deeply about serious, evidence-based history and how it shapes the world you live in today, subscribe to After the Sirens and leave a comment with your thoughts as we go, because this episode is meant for historians who don't settle for surface-level explanations. World War II did not just redraw borders or end empires. It permanently altered how humanity defines dignity, justice, and the limits of power. The human rights you hear debated today did not emerge from idealism or polite diplomacy. They were forced into existence by mass graves, burned villages, extermination camps, and cities flattened in minutes. This video explains in precise detail how the worst atrocities in human history triggered the most ambitious moral framework the world has ever attempted, and why understanding this process matters if you want to recognize early warning signs of abuse, state violence, and societal collapse in your own time. Before 1939, international law focused almost entirely on states, borders, and warfare between armies. Civilians were largely invisible in legal terms, treated as collateral rather than protected individuals. World War II shattered this illusion. The Holocaust, the systematic starvation of prisoners of war, mass executions in occupied territories, forced labor across Europe and Asia, and medical experimentation on human beings made it impossible to pretend that existing conventions were sufficient. What shocked post-war investigators was not only the scale of violence, but how legal and bureaucratic many of these crimes were. Orders were signed, records were kept, and laws were manipulated to justify murder. This realization fundamentally changed how rights were understood, shifting the focus from what states are allowed to do to what they are forbidden to do to individuals. The industrialized murder of 6 million Jews, along with Roma disabled people, political dissidents, and others, created a legal vacuum. There was no precise term for the deliberate annihilation of an entire people until Raphael Lemkin coined the word genocide in 1944. This was not a symbolic act. Naming the crime made it prosecutable. The Holocaust demonstrated that human rights abuses could not be treated as internal matters of sovereign states. This directly led to the principle that some crimes are so severe they concern all humanity. Today, this concept underpins international criminal law. Practically, this means that governments can no longer hide behind borders when committing mass atrocities, a lesson survivalists and analysts should understand when assessing early signs of state radicalization. Nuremberg established something unprecedented. Individuals could be held criminally responsible for actions carried out under state authority. "I was just following orders" was rejected as a legal defense. This principle reshaped military ethics, governance, and personal responsibility under authoritarian systems. For modern viewers, this has practical implications. Soldiers, officials, and even civilians are now expected to recognize unlawful orders. Understanding Nuremberg helps you evaluate how institutions collapse when personal responsibility disappears, and how ethical failure becomes systemic long before violence reaches its peak. The bombings of Warsaw, London, Dresden, Tokyo, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki demonstrated that, well, modern warfare erased the line between battlefield and home. Civilians were no longer incidental victims. They were, in fact, strategic objectives. This forced a reassessment of civilian protection and laid the groundwork for post-war human rights norms, emphasizing the right to life, shelter, and security. For preparedness-minded viewers, this history is, honestly, critical. It shows how quickly civilian infrastructure becomes a target and why resilience planning must account for state-level violence, not just natural disasters. Adopted in 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was not legally binding, but that was deliberate. It was meant to set a universal moral baseline applicable to all people, everywhere. Rights to life, freedom from torture, freedom of thought, and equality before the law were directly shaped by the crimes witnessed during the Second World War. This document became a reference point for constitutions, courts, and activist movements all around the world. Its real power, honestly, lies in its clarity. When analyzing modern conflicts or authoritarian trends, comparing state actions to the Declaration provides a practical diagnostic tool for identifying rights erosion early. Colonial subjects who fought in the war returned home unwilling to accept second-class status. They had seen European powers preach freedom while practicing domination. Human rights language became a weapon against empire, fueling independence movements across Africa and Asia. This connection matters because it shows how rights discourse spreads under pressure. For historians and strategists, it demonstrates how global crises accelerate ideological change far beyond their original scope. Almost immediately, human rights became a battleground between East and West. Civil liberties were emphasized in the West, while economic and social rights were highlighted in socialist states. This division weakened enforcement but expanded the concept of rights itself. Understanding this tension helps modern viewers decode why some governments emphasize security over freedom or development over individual liberty, often invoking selective interpretations rooted in this post-World War II split. Studying how the Second World War reshaped human rights sharpens your ability to identify warning signs of mass abuse. Dehumanizing language, emergency laws that suspend accountability, propaganda framing groups as threats, and the normalization of violence all appeared years before genocide and total war fully unfolded. Applying this knowledge means questioning narratives, protecting documentation, supporting independent institutions, and understanding when legal systems are being hollowed out rather than enforced. Every modern human rights debate, from war crimes tribunals to refugee protections, traces its logic back to the Second World War. The war proved that civilization does not collapse overnight. It erodes step by step. For serious historians and survival-minded viewers, this is not abstract theory. It is a manual written in blood, showing what happens when societies abandon restraint and why legal and moral frameworks exist to delay or prevent that outcome. If this deep dive added real value to your understanding of history and its modern consequences, subscribe to After the Sirens. Share this episode with someone who takes history seriously, and leave a comment with your perspective. This channel exists to preserve hard truths, not comfortable myths.